Welcome back to Slipspace Stories. Tonight, we journey through one of humanity's most storied military traditions, exploring the complete history of the Orbital Drop Shock Troopers. From their earliest conception in the fires of Earth's interplanetary conflicts to their legendary campaigns against the Covenant, the ODSTs have carved their legacy not with propaganda or glory-seeking, but through blood, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to a single motto: feet first into hell. Close your eyes and let yourself drift into the darkness of space, where brave soldiers prepare to plummet through fire and atmosphere toward uncertain fates below. This is their story. The seeds of descent, humanity's expansion, and early conflicts. To understand the ODSTs, we must first understand the world that birthed them. The 22nd century brought humanity to a crossroads. Earth's population had swelled beyond sustainable limits, straining resources and igniting tensions that had simmered since the previous century. Overpopulation, famine, and economic instability created a powder keg waiting for the smallest spark to ignite catastrophe. As early as 2129, the concept of orbital insertion had begun to take root in military planning circles. The United Nations, still functioning as humanity's primary governing body before the formation of the unified Earth government, recognized that future conflicts would extend beyond Earth's atmosphere. They needed soldiers who could deploy from orbit, bypassing traditional landing zones and striking deep behind enemy positions. The earliest iterations of what would eventually become the ODST concept emerged from these strategic deliberations, though they remained largely theoretical exercises in military doctrine. By 2158, humanity had established permanent settlements throughout the Sol system. Colonies dotted the moons of Jupiter, Mars hosted growing urban centers, and the asteroid belt provided rich mining opportunities. But with expansion came political fracture. On Europa, one of Jupiter's largest moons, a movement took root that would reshape humanity's future. The Frieden, a fascist organization backed by corporate interests from the unified German Republic, established itself in the major city of Catreus. Their philosophy centered on independence from United Nations oversight, seeking autonomy through any means necessary. The Friedens were not alone in their dissatisfaction. The Kozloviks, a neo-communist movement taking its name from their ideological founder, Vladimir Kozlov, had gained substantial support across Mars and various Jovian settlements. Both factions viewed the United Nations as an oppressive force, stifling the rights and freedoms of colonists who had risked everything to build new lives in the harsh environments beyond Earth. Tensions escalated as these groups moved from political rhetoric to direct action, setting the stage for the conflicts that would forge the ODSTs in fire and blood. In 2160, the fragile peace shattered completely. Frieden forces launched a calculated attack against the United Nations colonial advisors, stationed on Io, another of Jupiter's moons. The assault was brutal and decisive, killing dozens and sending a clear message that the Friedens would no longer accept UN authority in the outer system. What followed was 3 months of intense fighting, known as the Jovian Moons Campaign, spanning from March through June of that fateful year. The campaign unfolded across multiple Jovian moons simultaneously. On Io, UN forces struggled to maintain control against well-coordinated Frieden attacks. Europa became a contested battleground as Kozlovich forces joined the conflict, creating a three-way struggle for dominance. Ganymede and Callisto saw their own engagements as the fighting spread like wildfire through the system. The death toll mounted horrifically, with tens of thousands perishing in void-capable combat, surface skirmishes, and occasional atrocities as desperation took hold. This campaign proved a crucible for military innovation. Earth's national governments called upon by the United Nations to commit their military forces, found themselves facing unprecedented logistical challenges. Fighting across multiple celestial bodies simultaneously required new tactics, new equipment, and new thinking about how wars would be waged in the hostile environments of space. The distributed nature of the conflict led to confusion and inefficiency, with different national militaries operating according to their own doctrines and chains of command. It became painfully clear that humanity needed a unified military command if it hoped to maintain order across its expanding sphere of influence. The Jovian Moons campaign ended without decisive victory for any side. The Friedens and Kozlovits had demonstrated their capacity to challenge UN authority, while the United Nations had proven unable to quickly suppress the uprising, despite superior numbers and resources. More troubling still, the conflict had radicalized colonists throughout the system. Many who had previously remained neutral now harbored deep resentment toward the UN's heavy-handed intervention, viewing the bloodshed as proof that Earth's governments cared nothing for colonial lives and freedoms. In 2162, barely 2 years after the Jovian Moons campaign concluded, violence erupted once more. This time, the fighting came to humanity's cradle world. A series of bombings in South America in February ignited what would become known as the Rainforest Wars. These conflicts spread rapidly through the Amazon basin and beyond, with Kozlovich, Frieden, and United Nations forces all clashing across the continent's dense jungles and urban centers. The Rainforest Wars proved even more devastating than the Jovian campaign. South America's rainforests became killing fields as guerrilla tactics met orbital bombardment capabilities. Ecological devastation accompanied the human toll, with vast swaths of irreplaceable forest burned or poisoned by the weapons of war. The fighting was not confined to South America, however. Additional conflicts erupted globally as proxy wars and ideological struggles tore through population centers on every continent. Luna, Earth's moon, saw Kozlovic forces seize control of several city-states, while Mars descended into chaos as the various factions struggled for supremacy over humanity's most developed colony world beyond Earth itself. It was during these desperate times, in 2163, that the United Nations Space Command was formally established, drawing together the naval and marine forces of multiple nations into a single unified command structure. The UNSC represented humanity's acknowledgement that survival required cooperation on an unprecedented scale. The UNSC's founding charter gave it broad authority over all human military forces in the Sol system and beyond, creating the centralized command necessary to coordinate complex multi-theater operations. Within this newly formed military apparatus, the Orbital Drop Shock Troopers found their official birth. While the concept had existed for decades, 2163 marked the year when ODST became more than theory or small-scale experiment. The UNSC recognized that the Rainforest Wars and Jovian Moons campaign had demonstrated a critical need for rapid response forces capable of deploying anywhere in the system within hours. Traditional dropships and troop transports were vulnerable to anti-aircraft fire and required controlled landing zones. The ODST concept offered an alternative: single-occupant drop pods that could be deployed from orbit in rapid succession, overwhelming enemy air defenses through sheer numbers, while delivering elite soldiers directly into combat zones. The first true ODST operations commenced during the latter stages of the Rainforest Wars. These early Helljumpers, as they were already beginning to be called, deployed into some of the most contested regions of South America. Their missions involved seizing key strategic points ahead of conventional forces, conducting reconnaissance behind enemy lines, and eliminating high-value targets when opportunity presented itself. The mortality rate was staggering. Early drop pod technology was crude, and mechanical failures were common. Pods missed their targets by kilometers, crashed into mountains or bodies of water, or failed to deploy braking thrusters, resulting in lethal impacts. Those who survived the drop still faced being isolated deep in hostile territory, outnumbered and outgunned, with extraction far from guaranteed. Yet despite these horrific casualties, the ODST proved their worth time and again. When conventional forces bogged down in protracted sieges or found themselves unable to advance without unacceptable losses, ODST drops could change the tactical situation in minutes. A successful insertion might eliminate an enemy command post, capture a crucial bridge before it could be destroyed, or simply create enough chaos in enemy rear areas to force a general withdrawal. The psychological impact was equally significant. The sight of hundreds of drop pods streaking through the sky, wreathed in flames as they tore through the atmosphere, struck fear into even veteran soldiers. You never knew where the next wave would land, never knew if the hell jumpers were coming for your position specifically, or if they would strike somewhere else along the line. The Rainforest Wars raged for 19 months, consuming countless lives and resources before ending in 2164. The conflict left South America scarred and depopulated, its once vibrant ecosystems damaged in ways that would take centuries to heal. But the wars had also demonstrated that humanity could unite when faced with existential threats to its collective survival. The UNSC had proven itself capable of coordinating operations across multiple theaters, and the various military branches were learning to work together rather than as competing national entities. The broader struggle, encompassing the Jovian Moons Campaign, the Rainforest Wars, and numerous other smaller conflicts, became collectively known as the Interplanetary War. This 10-year period from 2160 through 2170 represented humanity's bloodiest internal conflict, with estimates suggesting tens of millions died in the fighting. The war touched every corner of human civilization, from the frozen surface of Europa to the desert cities of Mars, to Earth's own continents. Throughout this brutal decade, the ODSTs refined their doctrine and capabilities. Training became more rigorous as the UNSC sought to improve survival rates without sacrificing combat effectiveness. Physical conditioning reached extremes that would have seemed impossible in previous eras, with ODST candidates subjected to runs measured in dozens of kilometers, obstacle courses designed to break the body and spirit, and simulations of drop pod deployments that included everything from equipment failures to landing in hostile terrain. Weeks would pass in training environments that replicated snow, slush, and other harsh conditions, ensuring that hell jumpers could operate in any environment they might encounter. The ODST recruitment philosophy crystallized during these years. Officers led from the front, a tradition borrowed from the paratroopers of earlier centuries but taken to new extremes. UNSC insertion protocols explicitly stated that the commanding officer's drop pod should accelerate ahead of the main force, placing the commander on the ground first. This was not mere symbolism, but a fundamental statement of ODST values. Officers should lead rather than follow, should be willing to do anything they asked of their troops, and should expose themselves to the same dangers faced by the lowest-ranking private. Any officer who attempted to command from the rear would find their authority questioned and their orders ignored. The ODSTs respected competence and courage, not rank for its own sake. By 2170, the Interplanetary War was drawing to a close. Appropriately, the final act played out where it had begun, in the Jovian system. On the moon of Callisto, senior commanders of both the Koslovic and Friedan movements met with UN colonial authorities to sign the Callisto Treaty. The treaty marked the formal surrender of both factions and the end of large-scale organized resistance to UNSC authority. Some holdouts continued fighting for months or even years afterward, but these were scattered groups lacking the resources or coordination to threaten the established order meaningfully. The Callisto Treaty's signing brought about profound changes to human governance. The unified Earth government, which had existed since 2075 but held little real power, was transformed into a full-fledged governing body with authority over all human-controlled space. The UNSC fell under UEG oversight, becoming humanity's unified military force charged with defending all colonies and maintaining order throughout human space. The various national militaries were officially dissolved or absorbed into the UNSC structure, though many units retained distinctive traditions and identities within the larger framework. For the ODSTs, the post-war period brought both recognition and uncertainty. Their performance during the interplanetary war had been exceptional, proving the concept of orbital shock infantry beyond any doubt. Yet with the war's end, many questioned whether such specialized units would still be necessary. Peacetime economies demanded demilitarization, and the UNSC budget faced severe cuts as humanity turned its attention to rebuilding from a decade of devastation. The ODST divisions found their numbers reduced, though the UNSC leadership ensured that the core capability remained intact. Too many lessons had been learned, too much blood spilled to develop the doctrine, to simply discard it because peace had temporarily broken out. The years following the Callisto Treaty saw relative calm. Humanity's focus shifted from warfare to reconstruction and continued expansion. The Shaw Fujikawa Translight engine, successfully tested in 2091, opened the possibility of faster-than-light travel to human civilization. This revolutionary technology allowed ships to enter slipspace, an 11-dimensional realm where the laws of physics operated differently, enabling travels at speeds that dwarfed previous propulsion systems. By 2310, the first colony ships equipped with Shaw Fujikawa drives launched from Earth, beginning what historians would call the Domus Diaspora. Within 2 centuries, humanity established colonies on 800 worlds, moons, and asteroids. This explosive growth created enormous opportunities, but also new challenges. The further colonies spread from Earth, the more difficult governance became. Communications lag meant that orders from Earth might arrive weeks or months after being sent, by which time local situations had often changed dramatically. Economic differences grew as resource-rich colonies prospered, while others struggled with marginal environments and limited opportunities. These pressures, combined with Earth's historical tendency toward heavy-handed administration, planted the seeds for the next great internal conflict, the insurrection and years of shadow war. By the 24th century's closing decades, discontent had reached critical mass in the outer colonies. Many colonists felt that Earth exploited them, viewing the colonies solely as sources of raw materials and labor, while providing little in return. The Colonial Administration Authority and other governing bodies were seen as corrupt and indifferent to colonial needs. When colonists protested or sought greater autonomy, the response was often harsh crackdowns that only fueled further resentment. Around 2460, the simmering tensions exploded into open rebellion. The insurrection, as it came to be known, was not a unified movement, but rather a loose collection of separatist groups, terrorist cells, and genuinely aggrieved colonists pushed to desperation. Some insurrectionists were idealistic freedom fighters, genuinely seeking to improve conditions for their people. Others were brutal terrorists who targeted civilians and conducted horrific attacks in the name of independence. Still others were simply criminals who used the chaos as cover for personal profit. For the ODSTs, the insurrection marked a return to intensive combat operations after decades of relative peace. Beginning in 2490, Helljumper units deployed throughout the outer colonies to counter insurrectionist activities. These were not conventional military campaigns with clear battle lines and identifiable enemies. Instead, the ODSTs found themselves conducting counterinsurgency operations, hunting terrorist cells, protecting civilian populations from attack, and working to interdict weapons shipments bound for rebel groups. The nature of anti-insurrection operations differed fundamentally from the interplanetary war. During that earlier conflict, enemies wore uniforms and operated from known bases. The insurrectionists blended into civilian populations, stored weapons in schools and hospitals, and often had the sympathies, if not the active support, of local colonists. ODST missions during this period involved everything from hostage rescue operations to direct action raids against known rebel strongholds, to the grimmer work of ensuring that commercial vessels complied with security protocols. One particularly distasteful duty involved enforcing the Coal Protocol, enacted in 2535. Named for Admiral Preston Cole, this directive required all UNSC ships to purge their navigation databases if capture appeared imminent, preventing the Covenant from obtaining information about Earth and other colony locations. ODST combat teams were tasked with boarding commercial and private vessels to forcibly purge their navigation data, ensuring compliance even from unwilling captains. These missions often resulted in confrontations with civilians who viewed the procedure as an unacceptable invasion of privacy and property rights, further straining relations between colonists and the UNSC. Notable ODST units during the insurrection era began building reputations that would endure for decades. The 105th Shock Troops Division, also known as the Hell Jumpers, established itself as one of the premier ODST formations in the entire UNSC. Their insignia, a gold comet, became recognizable throughout human space. Members of the 105th developed an exceptional esprit de corps, taking immense pride in their unit and its traditions. Every Hell Jumper received a distinctive tattoo upon joining the unit, a comet and skull design that marked them as part of this elite brotherhood for the rest of their lives. The 105th and other ODST units developed a distinctive culture during these years. They were infamous for their aggressive attitudes and brutal efficiency. Fellow Marines often found ODSTs to be difficult, abrasive, and dismissive of non-ODST personnel. The Hell Jumpers cultivated this reputation deliberately, viewing themselves as superior to conventional forces. After all, they volunteered for a duty that most Marines considered suicidal. They jumped from orbit in pods barely larger than coffins, trusting their lives to technology that sometimes failed catastrophically, all to land in the middle of hostile territory where death waited in 1,000 forms. This superiority complex occasionally caused problems. Fights between ODSTs and regular Marines were common, often erupting from perceived slights or simple boredom. In these brawls, the ODSTs usually prevailed, their enhanced conditioning and aggressive mindset giving them an edge over standard infantry. But there was one group that the ODSTs learned to avoid: the Spartans. The Spartan incident and building resentment. In 2525, an incident occurred that would poison relations between ODSTs and Spartans for generations. 4 ODSTs from the 105th, serving aboard the UNSC Atlas, encountered a young Spartan candidate named John 1117 in the ship's gym. The ODSTs, led by Sergeant Langston and others under the command of then 2nd Lieutenant Antonio Silva, decided to test the 14-year-old to see if the rumors about Spartan capabilities were true. What followed was brief and brutal. The young Spartan, freshly augmented and still learning to control his enhanced strength and reflexes, responded to the ODST's challenge. Within seconds, 2 of the 4 ODSTs were dead, their bodies broken by blows they never saw coming. The other 2 suffered severe injuries that ended their military careers. John 117 walked away with barely a scratch, having demonstrated that even a freshly augmented Spartan child could kill trained ODST veterans with terrifying ease. No charges were filed. ONES classified the incident, and John 117 faced no consequences for killing 2 UNSC service members. For Lieutenant Silva and the surviving ODSTs, this was murder plain and simple, covered up by ONI to protect their pet super soldiers. Silva would carry a deep grudge against the Spartan program in general, and John 117 specifically for the rest of his life. This resentment spread throughout the ODST community as news of the incident leaked, despite ONI's efforts at containment. The ODSTs came to view Spartans as freaks, lab rats created through unethical procedures and given equipment that regular soldiers could only dream of possessing. The Spartans received Mjolnir armor, worth more than a corvette, wielded experimental weapons, and had AIs dedicated to their support. Meanwhile, ODSTs made do with standard body armor and whatever weapons they could scrounge. When battles were won, Spartans received credit and commendations, while the ODSTs who had bled to secure victory were forgotten in the footnotes. The fact that Spartans were abducted children, stolen from their families, and subjected to augmentations that killed or crippled half their number did little to soften ODST attitudes. To the Hell Jumpers, the Spartans represented everything wrong with how Oni operated: secrecy, moral compromise, and an ends justify the means philosophy that treated human beings as expendable resources. Not all ODSTs shared this view, of course. Some recognized that Spartans were victims of circumstances beyond their control, children turned into weapons without consent or choice. These more understanding ODSTs still maintained professional distance, but they respected the Spartans' combat effectiveness and acknowledged their sacrifices. Yet even among these more moderate voices, there remained an undercurrent of resentment at how the UNSC seemed to value Spartans above all other soldiers, as if 24 super soldiers mattered more than the tens of thousands of ODSTs who had given their lives for humanity over the decades. Despite these internal tensions, the ODST continued proving their worth throughout the insurrection. They conducted raids on rebel strongholds across dozens of colony worlds. They rescued hostages from terrorist groups, sometimes arriving too late, but often managing to prevent massacres. They interdicted smuggling operations that funneled weapons and explosives to insurrectionist cells. The work was grinding, thankless, and dangerous, with no prospect of a decisive victory that might end the conflict once and for all. The insurrection also saw ODSTs working alongside other UNSC Special Operations Forces, including the Orion Project personnel who preceded the Spartans. These augmented soldiers, while less capable than the Spartan IIs would become, still represented a significant capability improvement over standard infantry. The ODSTs who worked with Orion operatives gained valuable experience in combined operations that would prove crucial in the war to come. Training continued to evolve and intensify. The UNSC recognized that ODST operations in the insurrection required different skills than conventional warfare: urban combat, hostage rescue, precision strikes against hardened targets, intelligence gathering. All these became core components of ODST training curricula. The physical standards remained extreme, ensuring that every ODST candidate possessed the endurance and resilience to survive missions that might last days, or even weeks, behind enemy lines with no resupply or extraction possible. Drop pod technology improved significantly during this period. The early models used during the interplanetary war were crude and unreliable. By the 25th century, the M88823 human entry vehicle had become the standard ODST insertion platform. These pods, nicknamed eggs due to their oval shape, incorporated ceramic heat shielding, braking thrusters, limited maneuvering capability, and improved safety systems that reduced mechanical failure rates substantially. They were still dangerous, still required immense courage to use, but the odds of surviving the drop had improved from suicidal to merely terrible. Inside each SOEIV, an ODST rode in a crash seat surrounded by equipment racks, communications gear, and a rudimentary control system. Once the pod launched, the occupant had limited ability to alter their trajectory, mostly relying on pre-programmed flight paths and automated systems to reach their designated landing zone. The descent was violent, with G-forces that would incapacitate or kill an unprepared human. ODSTs received metabolic augmentations to help cope with these stresses: drugs to speed blood clotting, treatments to improve stamina and reduce the need for food and water, and conditioning regimens that pushed human physiology to its absolute limits. When a pod reached approximately 50 meters above the surface, braking thrusters would fire, slowing the descent to survivable speeds. Even so, the impact was tremendous, often stunning the occupant temporarily. Once on the ground, the ODST had to quickly exit the pod, retrieve the weapons and equipment stored in the vehicle's cargo spaces, and link up with other members of their unit. The window for this process was measured in seconds. Covenant forces, and before them insurrectionists, quickly learned to target landing zones, hoping to catch ODSTs while they were most vulnerable. The ODST anthem, a stirring piece played during drops to help troopers focus and calm their nerves, became an essential part of Helljumper culture during this era. Different units had variations, but all shared common themes: defiance in the face of death, pride in their service, and determination to complete the mission, no matter the cost. Listening to that anthem while plummeting through the atmosphere toward almost certain combat became a near-religious experience for many ODSTs, a moment of clarity before the chaos of battle consumed them. First contact. Everything changes. On February 3rd, 2525, human civilization encountered something that would dwarf all previous conflicts into insignificance. The agricultural world of Harvest, home to approximately 3 million colonists, went silent. When the CMA Argo arrived to investigate, they found a harvest consumed by plasma fire and strange alien constructs. Of the planet's population, only a few thousand survivors remained, clinging to life in scattered shelters while an incomprehensible enemy glassed their world. This enemy called themselves the Covenant, a theocratic alliance of alien species bound together by religious fervor and superior technology. They viewed humanity not as potential allies or even worthy opponents, but as vermin to be exterminated. The Covenant's declaration, delivered to horrified UNSC personnel, was simple and absolute. Humanity's existence was an affront to their gods, and every man, woman, and child would be eradicated. There would be no negotiation, no surrender, no coexistence, only extinction. For the ODSTs, the Covenant War represented a fundamental shift in their purpose and operations. No longer were they hunting human rebels or maintaining order in fractious colonies. Now they faced an enemy with technology centuries beyond humanity's. Species ranging from towering armored giants to swarms of methane-breathing creatures, all united in their goal of wiping out every human in the galaxy. The insurrection didn't end with the Covenant's arrival, but it became a secondary concern. Those insurrectionists who had any sense recognized that humanity needed to stand united or die divided. The ODST's first major engagement against Covenant ground forces occurred at the Battle of Hat Yai in late 2528 or early 2529. Elements of the 105th Division deployed onto the colony world to reinforce beleaguered UNSC forces attempting to hold back the Covenant advance. The ODSTs fought with their characteristic aggression and skill, inflicting significant casualties on Covenant forces. However, it became rapidly apparent that even the elite Helljumpers were fighting an uphill battle. Covenant plasma weapons melted through ODST armor like it was paper. Their energy shields absorbed dozens of rounds from human weapons before failing. Their warriors, particularly the Sangheli elites, possessed strength, speed, and combat reflexes that rivaled even the Spartans. The various Covenant species coordinated their attacks with sophisticated tactics, using the small Ungoi grunts as cannon fodder while elites and other heavy combatants struck at critical points. When UNSC forces thought they had gained the upper hand, Covenant aircraft and orbital support would arrive, turning victory into desperate retreat. Hat Yai fell despite the ODST's best efforts. The 105th suffered relatively light losses, managing to extract most of their personnel before the Covenant began glassing the planet. but light losses still meant dozens dead, and the planet's civilian population numbered in the hundreds of thousands. The ODSTs evacuated who they could, watching helplessly as Covenant energy projectors boiled the planet's oceans and incinerated its cities. This would become a grimly familiar pattern over the coming years. In 2530, ODST forces participated in the Battle of Arcadia. This engagement demonstrated the evolving nature of ODST operations in the Covenant War. Working alongside conventional Marine forces and the Spartan II Red Team, ODSTs helped to defend the colony's population centers from Covenant assault. The fighting was brutal, with house-to-house combat in urban areas and pitched battles across Arcadia's agricultural regions. The ODSTs proved instrumental in keeping Covenant forces from completely overrunning the population centers. Their training in urban warfare, honed during years of counterinsurgency operations, translated well to defending cities against Covenant ground assault. They established kill zones, set up interlocking fields of fire, and conducted precision strikes against Covenant command elements when opportunities presented themselves. Eventually, the UNSC managed to evacuate most of Arcadia's civilian population before the Covenant commitment grew too large to resist effectively. Following Arcadia, several ODST battalions joined the UNSC Spirit of Fire's rescue operation. This led to the Battle of Shield 0459, later designated as the Etron Harborage. On this ancient Forerunner installation, ODSTs fought alongside Spartans and Marines against Covenant forces, seeking to control the installation's ancient technology. The battle culminated in the Shield world's destruction, with the Spirit of Fire barely escaping the installation's collapse. The ODSTs who participated in this operation saw firsthand the terrible power of Forerunner technology, glimpsing weapons and structures that defied human understanding. As the war ground on through the 2530s and 40s, the ODSTs found themselves deployed to ever more desperate battles. The Covenant's advance seemed inexorable. World after world fell, glassed or conquered, their populations killed or scattered across the remaining colonies. The UNSC strategy became one of managed retreat, trading space for time while hoping to develop new weapons or tactics that might turn the tide. The Battle of Jericho 7 in 2535 saw intense ODST involvement. This world held strategic importance, and the UNSC committed substantial forces to its defense. ODST units conducted raids behind Covenant lines, destroyed supply depots, and eliminated high-value targets when intelligence identified them. For a time, it seemed the UNSC might hold Jericho 7th, might prove that humanity could stop the Covenant juggernaut. But weight of numbers and technological superiority eventually told. Jericho 7 fell, adding another name to the growing list of lost colonies. That same year, a small ODST detachment from the Ahanu 5th, assigned to the UNSC Midsummer Night, foiled a Covenant attempt to deceive the inhabitants of the rubble during the Battle of Mediset. The rubble was an unusual habitat, a collection of asteroid habitats connected in an ungainly but functional network. The Covenant sought to trick the rubble's inhabitants into revealing navigation data that could compromise Earth's location, the greatest secret in the war. Working in conjunction with Spartan II Grey Team, the ODSTs managed to defeat the Kig-Yar Jackal plan, preventing a potential catastrophe. In 2544, an ODST squad from the 105th Division deployed on an assassination mission to the world of Hayan. Their target was a logistics prophet, one of the Covenant's administrative leaders responsible for coordinating supply operations in a particular sector. This mission, supported by Spartan Cal 141, demonstrated the ODST's growing role in strategic direct action operations. Killing Covenant leaders when possible disrupted their command structure and forced them to divert resources to security that might otherwise support frontline operations. The mission to Hayan also highlighted the continuing dangers of orbital insertion. During the deployment, one ODST's pod burned up on atmospheric entry, the occupants' screams cutting off as the vehicle's ablative shielding failed, and plasma consumed everything inside. Another pod suffered a catastrophic failure after landing in deep water, the ODST drowning inside the submerged vehicle until Cal 141 managed to reach them and force the hatch open. These losses were not exceptional. They were simply the price of being an ODST, the cost of deploying to combat via methods that pushed human engineering to its limits. The Battle of Skopje in 2547 saw elements of the 105th Division defending a major UNSC logistics hub against Covenant assault. The ODSTs held critical positions throughout the battle, buying time for the evacuation of vital supplies and personnel. Many Helljumpers died holding those positions, selling their lives to ensure that the UNSC could continue fighting elsewhere. Their sacrifice was noted in after-action reports, but received little public recognition. The ODSTs didn't seek glory or medals. They sought victory, or failing that, they sought to make the enemy pay for every centimeter of ground in blood and fire. Throughout these years, ODST doctrine continued evolving to meet the Covenant threat. The emphasis shifted toward rapid insertion into contested zones, hitting the Covenant before they could establish complete control. ODSTs would drop onto worlds still partially held by UNSC forces, reinforcing defensive positions or conducting raids that forced the Covenant to divert troops from their main offensive. When worlds were clearly lost, ODSTs formed the rearguard, covering evacuations and ensuring that as many civilians as possible escaped before the Covenant's cleansing fires consumed everything. The training regimen intensified to near inhuman levels. ODST candidates now faced not only the physical challenges that had always defined Helljumper selection, but also combat simulations using intelligence gathered from Covenant engagements. They trained to recognize the various Covenant species by silhouette and behavior, learning which targets to prioritize and how different enemy types fought. They practiced engaging energy-shielded opponents, mastering the sustained fire discipline necessary to drain shields before delivering killing shots. They learned to recognize Covenant vehicles and aircraft, understanding their capabilities and weaknesses. Live fire exercises became more elaborate and dangerous, with trainees facing simulated Covenant attacks using actual Covenant weapons captured from battlefields. More than a few training accidents occurred when recruits underestimated the power of plasma rifles or the explosive yield of plasma grenades. The UNSC accepted these casualties as necessary. Better to lose a few recruits in training than send unprepared ODSTs into real combat, where their mistakes would cost not only their own lives, but those of their squad mates. The metabolic augmentations given to ODSTs also improved during the war years. Medical advances driven by the Spartan programs filtered down to conventional forces, allowing doctors to enhance ODST physiology in ways that would have been impossible decades earlier. Blood clotting accelerators reduced the chance of bleeding out from wounds that might otherwise prove fatal. Metabolic regulators allowed ODSTs to function for extended periods on minimal food and water, crucial for long-duration missions behind enemy lines. These augmentations were not remotely comparable to Spartan enhancements, but they gave ODSTs a measurable edge over standard infantry. Equipment also evolved to counter the Covenant threat. The ODST battle dress uniform, the signature black armor worn by Helljumpers, received constant updates and improvements. By the war's later years, ODSTs wore armor incorporating limited energy shielding in some variants, though nowhere near the level of protection provided by Mjolnir armor. The BDU was vacuum-rated, capable of supporting extravehicular activity for up to 15 minutes, essential for operations in hostile environments or when boarding enemy vessels in void. The ODST helmet, perhaps the most iconic piece of their equipment, featured sophisticated electronics and life support systems. The VISR, or Visual Intelligence System Reconnaissance, provided enhanced vision in low-light environments, infrared detection, motion tracking, and access to mission intelligence, including overhead mapping. The VISR transformed the ODST from merely an elite soldier into a sensor platform capable of gathering and processing tactical data in real time. During night operations or in the darkness of Covenant-controlled installations, the VISR gave ODSTs a crucial advantage over enemies that often relied on superior numbers and firepower. ODST weapons loadouts varied depending on mission parameters, but certain weapons became closely associated with Helljumper operations. The M7S submachine gun, equipped with an integral suppressor and often paired with a flashlight or laser sight, served as a standard close-quarters weapon. For longer engagements, ODSTs carried the MA5 series assault rifles, or BR-55 battle rifles. The M6 series pistols, particularly the M6C and M6S variants, provided reliable sidearms. For heavy weapons, ODSTs favored the M90 shotgun for clearing buildings and enclosed spaces, the SRS-99 sniper rifle for precision engagement, and the devastating M41 surface-to-surface rocket launcher, nicknamed the S-Bankiar, for destroying vehicles and heavy Covenant units. Some ODSTs specialized in particular weapons, becoming known within their units for exceptional skill. A sniper might be legendary for impossible shots that eliminated Covenant commanders from kilometers away. A demolitions expert might gain fame for creative use of explosives in situations that called for more than standard tactics. The ODSTs also made extensive use of UNSC vehicles when available. The M12 Warthog, a versatile reconnaissance and light attack vehicle, served ODSTs well in mobile operations. The M808 Scorpion main battle tank provided heavy fire support when situations called for overwhelming force. For the most dangerous missions, ODSTs sometimes deployed aboard D-77TC Pelican dropships, though this method lacked the speed and shock value of pod insertion. Pelicans were vulnerable to anti-aircraft fire and required controlled landing zones, two things rarely available when fighting the Covenant. The fall of Reach and Alpha Base. By mid-2552, the war had entered its final, most desperate phase. The Covenant had conquered or destroyed most of humanity's colonies. Hundreds of worlds lay glassed, their populations dead or scattered among the handful of surviving settlements. The UNSC clung to its remaining strongholds, knowing that each day might bring news of another world lost, another million humans dead. Hope had become a rare commodity, something whispered about in quiet moments, but hardly dared to believe in anymore. Then came Reach. Reach was humanity's most important military stronghold besides Earth itself. Located in the Epsilon Eridani system, the planet hosted massive fleet dockyards, ground-based defensive installations, and training facilities for UNSC personnel, including the Spartans. If Earth was humanity's heart, Reach was its strong right arm, the foundation of military power that had kept the UNSC in the fight despite horrific losses. The Covenant's discovery of Reach meant the war had entered its endgame. The fall of Reach began in late July 2552 and culminated in a massive assault in August. Covenant forces arrived in overwhelming strength, dozens of capital ships supported by countless smaller vessels. They struck with coordinated precision, targeting key installations and population centers simultaneously. The UNSC responded with everything available, throwing ships and troops into a desperate defense that everyone knew was likely futile, but that had to be attempted regardless. ODST involvement in the defense of Reach was substantial and tragic. Approximately 3,200 ODSTs from various battalions and divisions participated in the Battle of Vieri on August 12th. This massive ground engagement saw ODSTs working alongside UNSC Army forces in the Vieri territory, attempting to halt Covenant ground forces' advance toward major population centers. The fighting was savage, with both sides committed to holding or taking ground, measured in meters. The 7th Shock Troops Battalion, subordinate to the 105th Shock Troops Division, operated in the northern region during Vieri. They conducted defensive operations, counterattacks against Covenant breakthroughs, and raids on enemy artillery positions. Casualties were horrific. ODSTs died by the dozens, by the hundreds, their black armor standing out against Reach's red soil as they fell defending positions that would be overrun minutes or hours after their deaths. But they bought time, precious minutes that allowed civilians to evacuate, allowed the UNSC to reposition forces, allowed the defense to continue, even as its ultimate failure became increasingly apparent. The 11th Shock Troops Battalion also participated in the defense of Reach, seeing action during the siege of New Alexandria. This battle saw ODST units deployed throughout the major city, holding key positions against Covenant assault forces. One ODST, Baruti Gramps, Coleman of Alpha 9, died during the New Alexandria fighting when a burst of plasma struck him in the chest, destroying his heart. He fell while holding a piece of ground for reasons he never knew. His squad never told why that particular position mattered. It was a death that epitomized the ODST experience during Reach's fall, brave, necessary, and ultimately insufficient to change the outcome. Multiple ODST battalions were stationed aboard the UNSC Pillar of Autumn, a Halcyon-class light cruiser that had undergone extensive refits to support a classified ONI operation called Red Flag. This operation planned to use Spartans and other assets to capture a Covenant ship and use it to kidnap a hierarch, potentially forcing negotiated peace. The fall of Reach interrupted Red Flag before it could launch, but the Pillar of Autumn survived the battle and made a blind slipspace jump away from the dying planet. Major Antonio Silva commanded the ODST complement aboard the Pillar of Autumn. As Reach fell and the ship prepared to jump, Silva's ODSTs defended the vessel's engineering sections against Covenant boarders. The fighting was brutal and close quarters, with Covenant forces attempting to sabotage the fusion reactors that powered the ship. Silva's troops held, stacking Covenant corpses to create improvised fortifications, using dead aliens as cover to continue fighting even as ammunition ran low and casualties mounted. Their success keeping the reactors operational allowed the Pillar of Autumn to escape, though Silva had no way of knowing where that escape would lead. On August 30th, 2552, the Pillar of Autumn emerged from slipspace at Installation 04, the first Halo ring world humanity had ever encountered. The ship immediately came under attack from Covenant forces already present at the installation. During the space battle, Covenant boarding parties struck the Pillar of Autumn repeatedly. ODSTs fought through the corridors, defending critical systems and preventing the Covenant from capturing the ship intact. First Lieutenant Melissa McKay, serving as Silva's executive officer despite being junior in rank to what the position normally required, distinguished herself through exceptional leadership and tactical acumen during this running battle. Eventually, Captain Keyes gave the order to abandon ship. The ODSTs moved to their designated S-waves, preparing to deploy to the ring world below. Major Silva's pod, following UNSC insertion protocols, accelerated ahead of the main force. The commanding officer would land first, setting up a rally point and preparing to receive his scattered troops. This was the way ODSTs had always operated, officers leading by example rather than directing from safety. Installation 04, Guerrilla War on an Ancient Ring. The ODST deployment to Installation 04 scattered Silva's battalion across a zone approximately 3 kilometers in diameter. Despite the chaos of the landing, the ODSTs quickly organized, rallying to their commander's position. The AI Wellesley, assigned to Silva's pod as per UNSC protocols, had identified a strategic position during the descent, a butte that would provide excellent defensive capabilities and line of sight across the surrounding terrain. Silva wasted no time. He assigned Lieutenant McKay to take B Company and capture that butte from the Covenant forces currently occupying it. C Company received orders to link up with Pelican pilots who had landed their aircraft some distance from the ODST concentration, preparing those dropships for combat operations. A and D companies remained under Silva's direct command, fortifying their temporary position and preparing for the Covenant counterattack that everyone knew was coming. It came sooner than expected. Covenant forces, recognizing the threat posed by organized UNSC personnel, launched an assault on the ODST's temporary base. 50 Sangheili elites, supported by 100 Type 26 Ghosts and additional ground forces, struck the ODST positions with fury. The Helljumpers responded with disciplined fire and aggressive counterattacks. They had trained for this, had fought Covenant forces on a dozen worlds, knew how to identify targets and allocate fire to maximum effect. The battle raged for hours. ODSTs fell, their armor pierced by plasma fire or crushed beneath ghost attack vehicles, but they made the Covenant pay dearly for every meter. The temporary base held, though at terrible cost. Meanwhile, McKay's force advanced on the butte, climbing a spiraling ramp while Covenant forces above rained plasma grenades and concentrated fire down on them. The assault seemed to stall as Covenant defenders established killing zones that the ODSTs couldn't push through. McKay adapted. She identified an alternate access point, a passage leading into the butte's interior where Covenant forces had stored explosives. Understanding the opportunity, she fired a rocket into that chamber, triggering a massive secondary explosion that killed the Covenant defenders and created an alternate route to the butte's upper levels. Her forces used a lift system to reach the surface, just as Major Silva arrived with reinforcements, who had completed aerial insertions via Pelican. Together, they eliminated the remaining Covenant presence and secured what would become known as Alpha Base. Alpha Base served as the cornerstone of UNSC resistance on Installation Yo4. From this fortified position, ODSTs and Marines conducted operations across the ring, gathering intelligence, rescuing survivors, and striking at Covenant forces when opportunities presented themselves. Captain Keyes, after his capture and subsequent rescue by Master Chief John 117, established a command structure that integrated all UNSC forces on the ring under coordinated leadership. However, the situation on Installation 04 grew increasingly complex and dire as the days passed. The discovery of the Flood, a parasitic organism that consumed and transformed sentient beings into shambling horrors, added a new dimension of terror to the conflict. When Flood forces attacked Alpha Base, attempting to infiltrate through underground passages, the ODSTs found themselves fighting an enemy fundamentally different from anything they had encountered before. The Flood didn't fight like the Covenant. They swarmed in mindless waves, caring nothing for casualties or tactics, driven only by the imperative to infect and consume. ODST training in fire discipline and target prioritization helped them maintain cohesion while fighting the Flood, but the psychological impact was severe. Seeing human Marines transformed into Flood combat forms, watching those shambling corpses attack their former comrades, tested even the Helljumpers' legendary mental resilience. Private First Class Wallace Jenkins, a Marine who had been partially infected by the Flood, but retained some consciousness due to unusual circumstances, proved instrumental in Alpha Base's defense. Through interrogation of this tragic figure, Silva learned that the Flood planned to use the catacombs beneath the base to launch a surprise attack. The ODSTs plugged those passages, reinforced their defenses, and prepared for the assault. When it came, they held, though the battle left many ODSTs dead or wounded, and Alpha Base's defensive perimeter significantly contracted. The final phase of the Battle of Installation 04 centered on the downed Covenant cruiser, Truth and Reconciliation. Major Silva, learning from Cortana that Master Chief John 1117 planned to destroy the ring by detonating the Pillar of Autumn's fusion reactors, decided on a bold gambit. Rather than evacuate with other UNSC survivors, Silva would capture the Truth and Reconciliation, bringing a Covenant capital ship back to Earth as the ultimate intelligence prize and potentially war-winning asset. The timing was impeccable from a tactical perspective. The Covenant and Flood had been battling for control of the Truth and Reconciliation, with the Covenant finally succeeding in purging the flood from the vessel just before Silva's assault. The exhausted Covenant defenders fell quickly to the ODST attack. Silva secured the ship, ordered his technical teams to begin preparing it for slipspace departure, and waited for contact with Cortana and Master Chief. But Silva's plan violated the Cole Protocol. Taking the Truth and Reconciliation directly to Earth risked leading the Covenant to humanity's homeworld, if any Covenant forces pursued, or if the ship's systems transmitted their destination. Moreover, Silva had interrupted the sterilization process that his teams had been conducting, allowing some flood to survive hidden within the vessel. Lieutenant McKay, recognizing that Silva's determination to be the hero of Installation 04 would potentially doom billions on Earth, made the most difficult decision of her life. McKay destroyed the fiber optic bundle connecting the Truth and Reconciliation's bridge to its engines. Without that connection, the ship couldn't maneuver or jump to slipspace. It crashed back to Installation 04's surface, the impact killing everyone aboard, including Silva, McKay, and all the ODSTs who had fought so hard to capture the vessel. Their sacrifice prevented the flood from reaching Earth and stopped Silva's protocol violation, but it also cost the UNSC invaluable intelligence and dozens of its finest soldiers. The surviving ODSTs from Installation 04 evacuated aboard various vessels, including the UNSC Pillar of Autumn's remaining lifeboats and captured Covenant ships. They bore witness to the ring's destruction, watching as the massive installation tore itself apart in cascading explosions. Master Chief John 117 and Cortana, having successfully triggered the Autumn's reactor overload, were among the survivors. The ODSTs who had resented Spartans found their opinions somewhat softened by watching a single Spartan accomplish what entire companies of conventional forces could not, though mutual wariness remained the norm rather than exception. The battle for Earth, humanity's last stand. The year 2552 ground toward its final months. The UNSC was reeling from Reach's fall, from the losses at Installation 04, from 2.5 decades of relentless defeat. Then the Covenant came to Earth. On October 20th, 2552, the fleet of Sacred Consecration, led by the High Prophet of Regret, jumped into the Sol system. The appearance of Covenant forces at humanity's homeworld triggered every defensive protocol and contingency plan the UNSC had developed. ODSTs, stationed on orbital defense platforms, aboard ships, and at ground installations throughout the system went to battle stations. This was it. The final battle, the last stand, the moment when humanity would either find a way to survive or cease to exist. The initial fighting occurred on and around Earth's orbital defense platforms. The Cairo, Athens, and Malta stations came under assault by Covenant boarding parties. ODST combat teams, working alongside Marines and naval security forces, fought through the station's corridors to repel invaders and protect the station's critical systems. These defense platforms represented Earth's first line of defense, their magnetic accelerator cannons capable of destroying Covenant capital ships. Their loss would open Earth to direct assault. The Athens and Malta fell to Covenant bombs planted during the boarding actions, their massive structures torn apart by explosions that killed everyone aboard. The Cairo survived, thanks in part to Master Chief John 117's intervention and the efforts of its defenders. But surviving was not victory. The Prophet of Regret's flagship, the assault carrier Solemn Penance, descended toward Earth's surface, specifically targeting the East African Protectorate and the city of New Mombasa. In orbit above New Mombasa, a larger ODST operation prepared to launch. Multiple squads received orders to drop onto the assault carrier itself, boarding the Covenant flagship during atmospheric flight to capture the Prophet of Regret. This was an incredibly dangerous mission, requiring ODSTs to deploy into a heavily defended target, moving through atmosphere at high speed. Failure meant death, but success might decapitate Covenant leadership and potentially alter the war's trajectory. The ODSTs prepared their pods, checked their weapons, and waited for the order to drop. Among the squads assigned to this mission was Alpha 9, led by Gunnery Sergeant Edward Buck. Alpha 9 consisted of Buck, Corporal Taylor Dutch Miles, Lance Corporal Kojo Romeo, Agu, Private First Class Michael Mickey Crespo, and their newest member, Lance Corporal Jonathan Doherty, known simply as the Rookie. Buck's squad had fought together through numerous engagements, developing the tight cohesion that kept ODSTs alive in the most desperate situations. They trusted each other implicitly, knew each other's capabilities and limitations, functioned as a single organism during combat. Just before launch, the mission changed. Captain Veronica Dare, an Office of Naval Intelligence operative, assumed command of Alpha 9 for a classified objective. She didn't explain the mission details to the squad, simply ordering them to alter their trajectory mid-drop toward New Mombasa's Onai Alpha site instead of the assault carrier. Buck, despite his confusion and concern, followed orders. ODSTs operated on a need-to-know basis, and if Oni had a mission more important than killing a prophet, Buck would complete it without question. Then everything went wrong. As the ODST pods descended, the Prophet of Regret activated the Solemn Penance's slipspace drive, jumping away from Earth while still within New Mombasa's airspace. The resulting slipspace rupture created a massive shockwave and electromagnetic pulse that disabled the pod's electronic systems. Alpha 9's carefully planned drop became a catastrophic scatter, with each ODST's pod tumbling out of control toward different parts of the city. The Rookie's pod collided with Mickey's during the chaos, sending both careening into buildings. The Rookie's pod impacted hard, the crash knocking him unconscious for 6 hours. When he finally awoke in the darkness of New Mombasa's night, he found himself alone in a city occupied by Covenant forces. The rest of Alpha 9 was scattered somewhere in the urban environment, and the Rookie's mission became simple survival and locating his squadmates. New Mombasa, Operation Bumrush, and the Superintendent. What followed became one of the most documented ODST operations of the entire war, thanks to the Rookie's VISR recording systems and subsequent debriefings. The Rookie navigated through New Mombasa's eerily quiet streets, using clues left by his squadmates to piece together what had happened during the 6 hours he was unconscious. Each clue triggered a flashback, allowing him to experience the battles his squad had fought while he slept. Buck had landed relatively close to Dare's pod, but found it jammed shut. As he approached, Covenant forces converged on the position. Buck fought his way through them only to discover Dare's pod empty, except for her damaged helmet, which a Hurugok engineer creature was carrying. Before Buck could process this, Romeo eliminated the engineer from a distance, assuming it had killed Dare. The two ODSTs regrouped, discussed their options, and decided to locate the rest of the squad and evacuate the city. Dutch had landed near a critical infrastructure node, fighting through Covenant forces before linking up with NMPD officers and civilians trying to reach safety. His journey took him through New Mombasa's underground transit system, where he encountered both Covenant forces and evidence of the Superintendent, the city's second-generation AI, attempting to guide civilians to safety. Dutch's heavy weapons expertise proved invaluable in several engagements, his Spartan laser destroying Covenant vehicles and heavy infantry that would have otherwise overrun the survivors. Romeo, the squad's designated marksman, ended up on top of the NMPD headquarters building. From this elevated position, he provided overwatch for Buck and other UNSC forces operating in the area, his sniper rifle eliminating targets that threatened his squadmates. The NMPD building eventually came under heavy assault, with Covenant forces recognizing the threat posed by Romeo's position. The fighting grew desperate as Covenant troops pushed into the building itself, forcing NMPD officers and ODSTs into close quarters combat. Mickey's journey took him through some of New Mombasa's most heavily contested districts. He fought his way to a Covenant-controlled area where he discovered a Phantom dropship, seeing an opportunity. Using his skills with demolitions and mechanical systems, Mickey managed to commandeer the Phantom, providing Alpha 9 with the extraction asset they would desperately need later. Getting the alien aircraft operational required both technical expertise and significant risk, as Mickey had to strip away Covenant security protocols while fighting off enemies attempting to reclaim the vehicle. As the rookie uncovered these clues and experienced his squad mates' battles through flashback sequences, he also came to understand the broader situation in New Mombasa. The Covenant occupation was concentrated but thorough, with patrols throughout the city and checkpoints at critical infrastructure points. The human population had either evacuated or gone to ground, hiding in buildings and hoping to avoid detection. The city's superintendent AI was still active, despite the EMP, trying to help scattered UNSC personnel and guide civilians to safety through subtle manipulations of the city's systems. The rookie's investigation eventually led him to the same conclusion that had driven DARE's classified mission. The superintendent contained valuable intelligence data about New Mombasa, Earth's defenses, and potentially wider UNSC strategic information. More importantly, the superintendent had been in contact with a Huragok engineer creature that the Covenant called Quick to Adjust, but which had apparently absorbed much of the superintendent's data. DARE's mission was to secure this engineer and its knowledge before the Covenant could extract or destroy it. The investigation culminated in the data hive beneath New Mombasa, a facility where the superintendent's core systems were housed. The rookie descended into these underground chambers, fighting through Covenant forces and flood that had somehow survived Installation 04's destruction and made their way to Earth. The flood presence was limited but terrifying, reminding the rookie that humanity faced threats beyond even the Covenant. In the data hive's depths, the rookie finally found Dare, alive and protective of the engineer called Quick to Adjust, which the squad nicknamed Virgil. Dare explained the situation. Virgil contained irreplaceable intelligence that could help the UNSC understand Covenant operations and potentially provide insights into the Forerunner technology both sides sought. The engineer itself was a valuable asset, as Huragoks possessed incredible technological and engineering skills that could benefit humanity if Virgil could be convinced to help. Buck arrived shortly after this reunion, having fought his way to the data hive following intelligence leads and his knowledge of Dare's probable objectives. The reunited elements of Alpha 9 now faced a new challenge, extracting Dare and Virgil from the occupied city. With Mickey controlling a Phantom and Romeo providing overwatch, they developed a desperate plan involving a fighting retreat to a rendezvous point on the coastal highway. The escape sequence became legendary in ODST circles. Dare and Virgil rode in an Oliphant, a heavy transport vehicle with substantial armor but limited offensive capability. Buck and the rookie provided protection using Warthogs and a Scorpion tank, fighting through Covenant forces while moving along New Mombasa's elevated highways. Behind them, the Covenant fleet was beginning to glass the city, plasma beams striking structures and turning everything they touched to molten slag. The Covenant threw everything at Alpha 9 during this escape. Ghosts, wraiths, banshees, infantry in overwhelming numbers, all attempting to stop the ODSTs from reaching their extraction point. Buck and the rookie engaged targets continuously, the rookie's arms vibrating from sustained fire to the point where the sensation persisted for hours afterward. Dutch joined the fight at a crucial moment, using his Spartan laser to destroy a scarab that threatened to end the entire operation. Finally, with Covenant forces closing from all sides and the glassing of New Mombasa accelerating, Mickey brought the captured Phantom to Alpha 9's position. The squad loaded aboard, bringing Dare and Virgil with them, and escaped into the night sky just ahead of the plasma beams that consumed the city behind them. New Mombasa, one of Earth's great metropolises, ceased to exist. But Alpha 9 had completed their mission, securing intelligence and an asset that might help humanity survive the war. Approximately 1 month after the new Mombasa operation, Alpha 9 and Virgil were at the Quito Space Tether in an ONI-controlled sector. Sergeant Major Avery Johnson conducted the interrogation of Virgil, with the engineer providing information about Covenant operations, technology, and the location of the Ark, a massive forerunner installation beyond the Milky Way galaxy. This intelligence would prove crucial in the final months of the war. The Ark and War's End. November the 2nd, 2552, saw ODST forces deployed to Installation 05, another halo ring discovered by the Prophet of Regret. Elements of the 7th Shock Troops Battalion, deployed from the UNSC in Amberclad, conducted orbital insertions onto the ring's surface, with a mission to capture the Prophet. Most of 1st Platoon died upon or shortly after landing, with survivors including Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Stacker, Staff Sergeant Banks, and Private First Class Chips Dubbo, managing to link up with Master Chief John 117. These ODSTs assisted the Spartan in pursuing the Prophet through Installation 05's structures, fighting Covenant honor guards and regular forces. The Prophet of Regret died, but his death triggered a chain of events that would reshape the Covenant entirely. The elites were betrayed by the Prophets, who replaced them as the Covenant's warrior caste with the brutes. This led to civil war within the Covenant, with the elites eventually forming an alliance with humanity against the Prophet-led loyalist forces. The final major battle of the Human Covenant War occurred at the Ark in December 2552. This massive forerunner installation, located outside the Milky Way galaxy, served as both the control center for the Halo array and a construction facility for new rings. The Covenant's Prophet of Truth had traveled to the Ark, intending to activate all Halo rings simultaneously, fulfilling the Covenant religion's ultimate goal, while unknowingly dooming all sentient life in the galaxy. ODST involvement in the Ark campaign was substantial. On December 11th, troopers from the 7th Battalion deployed to the Ark's surface to destroy Covenant anti-aircraft artillery positions overlooking a desert sea. These emplacements prevented UNSC dropships and aircraft from operating freely, limiting the UNSC's tactical options. The ODSTs fought through heavy Covenant resistance to reach and destroy these positions, opening the way for the frigate UNSC Forward Unto Dawn to land near the cartographer building. The cartographer provided maps and intelligence about the Ark's layout, allowing the UNSC and elite forces to plan their assault on Truth's position. During the Battle of the Citadel, the campaign's final engagement, the 7th Battalion breached Covenant defensive positions and fought through to Truth's location. They witnessed the activation attempt, saw the Prophet of Truth's death at the hands of the Arbiter, and evacuated ahead of the premature firing of the replacement installation 04. The exploding Halo ring damaged the Ark catastrophically, but most UNSC forces managed to escape. The war was over after 27 years of relentless combat, after hundreds of worlds lost and billions dead. Humanity had survived. The Covenant was shattered, its member species fragmenting into dozens of factions, ranging from elite-led groups seeking peace to brute war bands continuing to raid human colonies. But the united front that had nearly exterminated humanity no longer existed. Post-war operations and the Spartan 4 program. The war's end did not mean peace for the ODSTs. The post-war galaxy was chaotic and dangerous, with numerous threats demanding UNSC attention. Insurrectionist groups that had gone dormant during the Covenant War resurged with renewed vigor, viewing the UNSC's weakened state as an opportunity. Remnant Covenant factions continued raiding colonies, seeking resources or simply acting on lingering hatred for humanity. The flood threat loomed as a potential catastrophe if any survived samples or installations remained undiscovered. Piracy exploded as demobilized soldiers from all sides turned to banditry. ODSTs deployed throughout human space to address these threats. They conducted counterinsurgency operations against insurrectionist cells, protected reconstruction efforts on worlds recovering from glassing, and hunted Covenant remnants that refused to accept the war's end. The missions were often low intensity compared to the Covenant War's desperate battles, but they were no less important. Every insurrectionist bomb prevented, every Covenant raiding party eliminated, every pirate crew captured, represented lives saved and stability maintained. Alpha 9 continued operating together in the immediate post-war period. In January 2546, the squad deployed to Draco III to counter insurrectionist activity. Later, they participated in operations on Talitsa, extending through August 2555. These missions demonstrated that even in peacetime, the UNSC needed its elite forces. ODSTs brought capabilities that conventional forces simply didn't possess. The ability to deploy rapidly to crisis situations, the training to operate with minimal support in hostile environments, and the combat experience that came from surviving the war. However, these operations also revealed the ODST's limitations compared to Spartans. As the UNSC developed its Spartan 4 program, recruiting volunteers from conventional forces and subjecting them to augmentation procedures, the line between ODSTs and Spartans began to blur. The Spartan 3s were older recruits compared to the Spartan 2s and 3s, many coming from ODST and other special operations backgrounds. They received augmentations and Mjolnir armor that made them significantly more capable than any unaugmented human could hope to be. In 2554, several members of Alpha 9 were offered positions in the Spartan 4 program. Edward Buck, Taylor Dutch Miles, Kojo Romeo Agu, and Michael Mickey Crespo all accepted. They underwent augmentation procedures, received new armor, and were assigned to continue operating as Fire Team Alpha 9, one of the few Spartan teams that retained its ODST-era designation. The rookie, Lance Corporal Jonathan Doherty, was also offered a position according to later statements by June A. 2066, a Spartan 3 recruiter. However, the rookie never received this offer personally. He died on Draco III in 2554, killed during an insurrectionist ambush. The rookie's death hit Alpha 9 hard. He had been the squad's newest member when he joined just before New Mombasa, but he had proven himself repeatedly during that operation and subsequent missions. His loss, combined with the changes brought by the Spartan 4 program, fundamentally altered the squad's dynamic. Dutch retired shortly after receiving his augmentations, seeking a quieter life away from constant combat. The remaining members continued operating, but the easy camaraderie of their ODST days had been replaced by something more professional and distant. In 2555, during Operation Culpeper, Mickey Crespo betrayed his squad mates. He had harbored insurrectionist sympathies, growing disillusioned with the UNSC during the war's final years. When given the opportunity, Mickey turned on Buck and Romeo, siding with rebels they were supposed to be capturing. Buck managed to subdue Mickey without killing him, but the betrayal effectively ended Alpha 9 as a functional unit. Mickey was court-martialed and imprisoned, while Buck and Romeo were reassigned to other duties. Buck eventually joined Fire Team Osiris, working alongside other Spartans on high-priority missions, including the hunt for Master Chief John 117 after his actions on Meridian in 2558. Legacy and continuing operations. By 2558, the ODSTs had been serving for nearly 400 years, since their inception during the Interplanetary War. They had fought in every major conflict humanity had faced, from the Rainforest Wars to the final battle at the Ark. Thousands of Helljumpers had died over those centuries, falling from the sky in burning pods or dying on battlefields across hundreds of worlds. Their sacrifices had bought humanity time, space, and ultimately survival. The post-war era saw the ODST concept evolving once again, with the Spartan 4 program producing augmented soldiers in significant numbers. Some questioned whether conventional ODSTs still had a place in the UNSC order of battle. The answer was a resounding yes. Not every soldier wanted to become a Spartan, undergo the augmentation procedures, or accept the responsibilities that came with wearing Mjolnir armor. The ODSTs represented a middle ground, elite soldiers capable of extraordinary operations, but not requiring the massive resource investment that each Spartan demanded. ODSTs continued to serve as the UNSC's rapid reaction force, deploying to crisis situations throughout human space. When a colony sent distress calls, when intelligence identified a high-value target, when circumstances demanded soldiers who could deploy anywhere within hours, the call went out to the Helljumpers. They dropped feet first into combat zones that conventional forces couldn't reach quickly enough, secured beachheads for follow-on forces, and conducted missions that required more finesse than Spartan teams could provide. The training remained as brutal as ever, ensuring that ODST quality stayed at the levels the program demanded. Recruits still ran dozens of kilometers daily, still faced obstacle courses designed to break them, still trained in simulated environments, replicating every hostile condition they might encounter. The drop pods had improved over the decades, with better safety systems and more reliable thrusters, but the fundamental experience remained unchanged. Launching from orbit in a ceramic coffin, burning through atmosphere at speeds that would kill unaugmented humans, trusting your life to technology and training while plummeting toward uncertain fate. The ODST culture persisted as well. The gold comet insignia of the 105th Division still adorned countless shoulders. The comet and skull tattoos that Helljumpers received upon joining their units remained marks of pride and belonging. The anthem still played during drops, its familiar rhythms calming nerves and focusing minds on the mission ahead. The traditions of officers leading from the front, of earning respect through competence rather than demanding it through rank, of never leaving a fallen comrade behind if retrieval was remotely possible. All these values that defined what it meant to be an ODST continued unchanged. New generations of ODSTs learned about their predecessors' exploits during training. They heard stories of Major Silva's defense of Alpha Base, of Alpha 9's desperate escape from New Mombasa, of countless unnamed Helljumpers who had given their lives for causes both great and small. These stories weren't propaganda meant to inflate the ODST's importance. They were honest accounts of missions completed, of sacrifices made, of the price humanity's elite soldiers paid to serve. The ODST's relationship with Spartans gradually improved in the post-war era, though wariness remained the default. Spartans who had been ODSTs themselves, like Buck and other former Helljumpers in the Spartan 4 program, helped bridge the gap between the two communities. They spoke both languages, understood both perspectives, could explain to Spartans why ODSTs resented them, and to ODSTs why Spartans weren't the inhuman freaks they'd been painted as. Mutual respect, if not friendship, became increasingly common as the two groups worked together on joint operations. The equipment continued evolving to meet new threats. ODST armor incorporated lessons learned from fighting the Covenant, with improved protection against plasma weapons and better sensor systems. The VISR was refined, providing even more detailed tactical information and superior low-light performance. New weapons entered service, many incorporating technologies reverse-engineered from Covenant or Forerunner sources. The drop pods received yet another generation of improvements, with the SOEIV designs of the Covenant War era supplemented by new models optimized for different insertion profiles. Alpha 9 reformed in late 2558, brought back together by circumstances and necessity. Buck resumed command, bringing with him Romeo and Dutch, who had come out of retirement and completed the Spartan augmentations himself, Even Mickey was released from imprisonment to rejoin the team, his particular skills needed for an operation that couldn't proceed without him. The reformed Alpha 9 consisted of 4 Spartans, rather than 5 ODSTs, but they retained their original designation, a testament to their origins and the foundation that had made them who they were. This evolution from ODST squad to Spartan fire team exemplified the changing nature of special operations in the post-war UNSC. The lines between different elite units were becoming more permeable, with personnel moving between roles as circumstances demanded. An ODST might become a Spartan, bringing their Helljumper training and mindset to their new role. A Spartan might work with ODSTs, learning from their centuries of institutional knowledge about insertion operations and rapid reaction missions. The future of humanity's special operations forces lay not in rigid categories, but in flexible integration of capabilities. The ODST in modern context today, decades after the war's end, the ODSTs continue serving as a vital component of the UNSC military. They deploy to former Covenant colonies undergoing reconstruction, ensuring that remnant factions don't sabotage recovery efforts. They hunt war criminals from all species, bringing to justice those responsible for atrocities during the conflict. They protect archaeological sites where Forerunner artifacts might be discovered, preventing them from falling into the wrong hands. They train local defense forces on frontier worlds, sharing their expertise to help colonies protect themselves. The missions vary dramatically in scale and intensity. Some are quiet and low profile, involving weeks of surveillance followed by a single precise strike. Others explode into full-scale combat, with ODSTs fighting alongside Marines and Spartans against threats that require overwhelming force to defeat. The Helljumpers adapt to whatever situation confronts them, drawing on centuries of institutional knowledge and the flexibility that comes from serving in every environment imaginable. New Mombasa has been partially rebuilt, though it will never fully recover from its glassing. The areas where Alpha 9 fought remain monuments to that desperate night, with plaques marking significant locations and memorials to the civilians and soldiers who died there. The rookie's final resting place on Draco III has become an unofficial pilgrimage site for ODSTs, who leave behind coins, spent casings, or other tokens in remembrance of a Helljumper who exemplified their values: competent, brave, and willing to sacrifice everything for his squad. The 105th Division still exists, still recruits the best soldiers the UNSC can find, still maintains standards that most would consider impossible. The 7th Battalion, subordinate to the 105th, continues operating with the same Gold Comet insignia it carried during the Covenant War. Other ODST formations throughout the UNSC maintain their own traditions and identities, but all share the core values that have defined Helljumpers since 2163: courage, competence, and commitment to the mission, above all else. The motto, "Feet first into hell," remains as relevant now as it was 400 years ago. Every ODST who climbs into a drop pod, who accelerates toward an unknown landing zone, who crashes to the surface and emerges ready to fight, lives that motto. They choose the most dangerous insertion method ever devised, accept casualties that would be unacceptable in conventional forces, and accomplish missions that others cannot even attempt. They are humanity's rapid reaction force, its elite shock infantry, and its statement to the galaxy that humans will fight for their survival, with every resource available. Looking back, moving forward. The history of the Orbital Drop Shock Troopers spans 4 centuries of human expansion, conflict, and survival. From their origins during Earth's interplanetary civil wars to their crucial role in humanity's victory over the Covenant, the ODSTs have consistently proven their value and their courage. They have dropped onto more worlds than most humans will ever visit, fought battles that history barely remembers, and died in ways both heroic and anonymous. Every world humanity colonized, every Covenant advance halted, every civilian evacuation covered, every critical mission completed, the ODSTs were there. They didn't seek recognition or glory. They sought to complete the mission, to bring their squad mates home alive if possible, to make the enemy pay dearly for every meter of ground. The ODST creed valued competence over rank, courage over caution, and mission success over personal survival. The cost has been staggering. Thousands of ODSTs died during the interplanetary war, learning the doctrine that would guide their successors. Thousands more perished fighting insurrectionists, maintaining order in the colonies during humanity's expansion era. Tens of thousands fell during the Covenant War, their bodies scattered across hundreds of worlds or never recovered at all. Each of those deaths represented not just a casualty statistic, but a person who had endured the grueling selection process, survived the brutal training, and chosen to volunteer for the most dangerous duty the UNSC offered. Yet the ODSTs persist. New recruits continue volunteering, drawn by the challenge, the tradition, or simply the desire to serve at the highest level. They understand the risks, know the casualty rates, recognize that ODST duty offers little except hardship and danger. But they volunteer anyway, because someone must do this work, and because wearing the black armor and gold comet insignia means joining a brotherhood that transcends life and death. The future of the ODST program remains secure. The UNSC recognizes that even with Spartans, even with advanced technology, there will always be need for soldiers who can deploy anywhere rapidly and fight effectively with minimal support. The ODSTs fill that need, providing capabilities that complement Spartans rather than competing with them, where Spartans are the hammer, crushing enemy strongpoints with overwhelming force. ODSTs are the scalpel, striking precisely at critical targets. Both are necessary. Both save lives and win battles. As humanity continues expanding into the galaxy, as new threats emerge and old ones resurface, the ODSTs will be there. They will drop from orbit in their ceramic pods. They will crash to hostile surfaces and emerge ready to fight. They will complete their missions or die trying. The motto has never changed. The commitment has never wavered. The standard has never lowered. Feet first into hell, now and always, for as long as humanity needs soldiers, willing to make that jump. Final reflections. We've journeyed through 4 centuries of ODST history tonight, from the Jovian Moons campaign to the modern era. We've witnessed their finest moments and their greatest sacrifices. We've seen how the concept of orbital shock infantry evolved from theoretical exercises to the most elite force in the UNSC arsenal. We've explored the battles that defined them, the culture that sustained them, and the values that made them what they are. The Orbital Drop Shock Troopers represent something fundamental about humanity's response to adversity. When faced with extinction, when fighting enemies that possessed superior technology and numbers, when conventional solutions proved insufficient, humans created the ODSTs. They took volunteers, pushed them beyond normal human limits, gave them a doctrine emphasizing audacity and aggression, and dropped them into situations where failure meant death. And those volunteers succeeded, time and time again, proving that courage and skill could overcome apparently insurmountable odds. Every ODST who ever lived or died embodies certain truths about human nature. That courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. That leadership comes from example rather than authority. That the mission matters more than personal survival. That your squad mates' lives are worth more than your own. That no matter how desperate the situation, giving up is never an option. These truths sustain the ODSTs through 400 years of service, and they will sustain whoever follows in their footsteps. as you drift off to sleep tonight, remember the hell jumpers. Remember the soldiers who dropped feet first into hell so that humanity might survive. Remember their sacrifices, their courage, their unwavering commitment to mission and squad. They asked for no recognition, expected no rewards beyond the satisfaction of mission completion. They simply did their duty, knowing that duty might cost them everything. Sleep well, knowing that if humanity ever needs them again, the ODSTs will be there. They'll climb into their pods, accelerate toward uncertain fates, and crash to hostile surfaces ready to fight. Because that's what hell jumpers do. That's what they've always done. That's what they'll continue doing as long as humanity needs soldiers willing to make that jump. Feet first into hell, now and always. Now and